Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this predetermination meeting for development of land for residential use west of 21 Polmont Park, Polmont Road, Polmont, for the Manor Forest Limited, being P21 06556 treble P. So tonight, unfortunately, convener can't be with us, so I'm standing in his place. He will be listening and he's just not fit to take part in the meeting due to his health concern. The meeting will be conducted as a hybrid meeting and it's being live recorded on the council website. Do we have any apologies?
Thank you, convener. We have apologies submitted by Councillor Colley and also Councillor Steenbank. Thank you, convener.
Thank you. And can we just run through who's present, please? Just to introduce yourselves, especially to the guests. Sorry, Councillor Alf Kelly, Vice Convener of Planning. Forest isn't there. Do you want to start with Gary?
Councillor Gary Bowes.
Fiona? No, of course. Councillor Flynn? No. Councillor Forrest?
Hello, Gordon Forrest. I councillor for Lower Braes.
Councillor Kerr?
Councillor James Kerr.
Councillor Murtagh?
Councillor Laura Murtagh.
Councillor Redmond?
Councillor Jack Redmond for Bonnybridge and Larbert.
Councillor Sinclair?
Hi all, Councillor Ian Sinclair, Falkirk North Ward.
Thank you. And
Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Buchanan.
Councillor Buchanan. Welcome. I hope you're feeling a wee bit better anyway.
Thank you.
We have agents for the applicant, Mr. Benny. Anyone else on behalf of the applicant? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Does anyone have declaration of interest in this? No. Okay. And now, Officer Henderson will give the procedure for the meeting.
Thank you, convener, and I think we have a presentation that will be screen shared in just a moment. So welcome everyone. Thanks, Jack. The procedure is fairly sequential. The first point you'll note there is that the convener will, following this, pass over to our planning officer, Brent Vivian, who will present the report that's noted on the agenda this evening. Thanks, Jack. As the next stage, the convener will then invite the applicant, or in this case, the applicant's agent, to speak to their proposal, and the applicant has 10 minutes to summarise their position on the proposal. There will then be an opportunity for any statutory consultees, and I believe we have representation from the Community Council this evening, so there is then an opportunity for that representative to speak to any comments on the application for up to 5 minutes. Thank you, Jack. At that stage, members of the committee then have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant or the agent or the statutory consultees, and indeed ask questions of officers who are in attendance at the meeting, which includes technical officers and also me as the legal advisor to the meeting. Thanks, Jack. The next stage is that the convener will then invite other parties that have submitted representations, so that can be by way of objection or by way of support, to speak to the representations that they've submitted. And these parties each have, as noted on the slide, up to 5 minutes to speak to their representations. This, and I believe the next slide, touches the point that the convener has the power, where there's perhaps repetition in points being raised, to point that out and move matters on. Thank you. And the next slide, please, Jack. So we've already covered that slide. Thank you. So at that point, the applicant and the applicant's agent then has an opportunity to respond to any of the points that have been raised by the parties that have been heard by the committee. And then at that point, members of the committee will be invited to see if they have any further questions of any party. And again, they can seek guidance from officers at that stage. So next slide, please, Jack. And members are also invited following those questions to identify if there are any particular planning issues that they would like to see addressed in the report that will subsequently come to a meeting of the planning committee for determination. And finally, the convener would, after that, close the hearing session. There are some procedural points that follow in the upcoming slides, if we're able to move on to them. So an important point is it's a hearing. There's not to be any cross-examination of parties, and all remarks and comments should be directed through the convener, who has ultimately control over the order of the hearing session. Next slide, please. Anyone who's intimated their intention to be at the hearing but isn't here, the meeting is not delayed as a result of that, and it can indeed proceed without that person being available for the meeting. And as a last point, the convener is responsible for ensuring the hearing is conducted efficiently and having regard to the principles of natural justice. So that sums up the procedures, convener, and at that point I would invite you to introduce the report, which would be by Brent Vivian in this case. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Officer Vivian Brent, would you like to give your report on this matter?
Thank you, convener. This application is a major development and seeks planning permission in principle for the development of land for residential use, and an indicative site layout accompanies the application showing 48 units. Jack, if I could ask you to bring up the location plan for the site, please. We can have a look at that. Okay, the application site's outlined in red on the plan in front of you. It lies on the north side of the A803 Polmont Road. Polmont Park Housing Estate lies to the east at the Polmont village edge. Ray Buchanan Park lies on the opposite side of the A803, and Polmont Burn and Mature Woodland adjoin the site to the west. There's a couple of photos that I can share as well. I'll ask Jack to share. The first one's called Site Frontage 1. This photograph's taken from Ray Buchanan Park, looking towards the site. As you can see, it's open grassland and rises in level away from the road. Beyond the rear boundary of the site is a row of mature trees, which you can see. Beyond that further, the land drops in level to a commercial area on the on the A9. Which includes the Klondike Garden Centre. Jack, if you could bring up another photograph. This one's called View Towards Polmont 1. This photo is taken looking east towards Polmont Village, with the site on the left and Ray Buchanan Park on the right. And you can see the houses at Polmont Park on the left-hand which is at the village edge. Thank you, Jack. A predetermination hearing is required for an application for a major development that is significantly contrary to the development plan. Thereafter, consideration of the application by the Council's Planning Committee is required. The proposed development is considered to be significantly contrary to Falkirk Local Development Plan 2, owing to its scale out with the Polmont village limits within the countryside and a green belt. Section 3 of the report outlines the planning history for the site, which includes consideration of the site at several consecutive local development plan examinations for housing allocation. Most recently, the site was considered at the Local Development Plan 2 examination, with the site being proposed for housing for older people. The site was not recommended for inclusion in the Local Development Plan 2 by the Scottish Government reporter for the reasons outlined in paragraph 3.5 of the report. The examination report for Local Development Plan 2 was considered at the meeting of the Council on 30th of June 2020. The reporter's recommendation for the site was accepted and it was not included as a housing allocation in LDP2. The consultation responses are summarised in section 4 of the report. Further information clarification has been sought by consultees in relation to noise impact, drainage and contaminated land. I would highlight in particular that the engineering design unit would not support the submitted site layout, but appreciate that it is indicative only at this stage and gives an indication of unit numbers. The Transport Planning Unit are generally satisfied with the proposal for a Ghost Island junction to serve the proposed development and the capacity assessment, which is based on 48 units. Museum Services have highlighted that the existing skyline view from the north should be maintained as it is at present. And they also highlight that there is a stone mile marker in the boundary wall dating from the late 18th century that should be retained. Children's Services have advised that the proposal raises school capacity issues in relation to St Margaret's Primary School, Graham High School and statutory nursery provision. They have therefore requested a financial contribution. Based on 48 houses, the contribution would be circa $456,000. Polmont Community Council have objected to the application for the reasons detailed in section 5 of the report. A total of 12 representations have been received, consisting of 11 objections and 1 representation in support. One of the objections is a petition with 5 Polmont Park addresses listed. The representations are summarised in paragraph 6.1 of the report and include concerns in relation to local development plan policy, the community consultation process, landscape and visual impacts, amenity impacts, countryside access, heritage, ecology and biodiversity, drainage and flooding, traffic, road safety and access, infrastructure, and previous development of the site. Section 7A of the report sets out the relevant policies of the local development plan that the application is required to be assessed against, and it notes that the application site lies out with the Polmont village limits, within the countryside and a green belt. The site also lies within the Antonine Wall World Heritage Site buffer zone. Section 7B of the report outlines the relevant material considerations in determining the application, which are Scottish Planning Policy, Falkirk Council Supplementary Guidance, the consultation responses, the public representations, the planning history for the site, and revised draft National Planning Framework 4. I would just touch on Scottish Planning Policy in particular, as this indicates that local authorities should maintain a 5-year effective housing land supply. Where this is not the case, there is justification to consider additional sites if they would contribute to sustainable development. The Council's 2021-2022 housing land audit indicates that the Council has a 4.8-year effective housing land supply. This amounts to a shortfall in the 5-year effective supply of 122 units. In summary, Convener, this report provides factual and background information in relation to the proposed development, and no assessment is included or implied in the report. A full assessment of the planning issues raised will be presented to a subsequent meeting of the Planning Committee following consideration of the matters discussed at this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Vivian, I got it right round this way. Would Mr. Benny, the applicant agent, like to give his thoughts on?
Thank you, Convener. On behalf of my client and in support of my client's planning application, I would first of all thank you for this opportunity to provide members of the committee with a brief outline of the information I consider is of importance and relevance to the ongoing consideration and ultimate determination of this application. In so doing, I would wish first of all to direct members' attention to the matters set out within the planning statement, which has been lodged in support of the application, the terms of which set out in full the planning case which my client considers provides the justification for granting planning permission in respect of this application. Moving on from this, I would wish to address directly a number of matters which are set out within the committee report which is before you today. At paragraph 3.5 of the report, members' attention has been drawn to matters raised within the examination report which was prepared by the reporter relative to Local Development Plan 2. In my view, a number of the findings made by the reporter are incorrect or misleading, with other findings having been overtaken by events. First of all, the development of this site will not reduce the separation distance between Polmont and Grangemouth, and it is incorrect factually of the reporter to state that this distance would be reduced as a consequence of the proposed development of this site. Consequently, his findings in the matter of the reduction of the effectiveness of the greenbelt at this locale are coloured by this incorrect finding to which I have just referred. He is also incorrect to state that sites BUS 03 and BUS 23, which are the Klondike Garden Centre and Falkirk Distillery, have a bearing on this consideration, given that due to the prevailing topography across the site, neither of these existing business sites can actually be seen from the site. Consequently, issues of visual or perceptual foreshortening of the separation between Polmont and Grangemouth simply don't arise. On the matter of the impact of the proposed development upon the Antonine Wall World Heritage Site, the reporter's findings have been overtaken by events to the effect that neither Historic Environment Scotland nor the Council's Museum Service have offered any objection to the proposed development based upon its impact on the World Heritage Site. Consequently, these findings on the report of the reporter can be discounted as being of any material relevance to the consideration of this application. In light of these considerations, it is my view that the reasons why the examination reporter did not recommend the allocation of the site cannot, on any reasonable level, continue to provide a valid basis upon which to oppose this proposed development. I will now comment on the matters raised under the heading Consultations within the report before you. Firstly, it is noted that the Engineering Design Unit have advised that accident statistics for this section of road display a high average accident severity ratio, which would suggest extreme care would be required with any changes to the use of the road. This statement is wholly inaccurate and incorrect and is not supported by any evidence. This application, on the contrary, is supported by a Stage 1 road safety audit, the terms of which have been prepared in association with Falkirk Council in their capacity as the overseeing organisation. This audit process has raised no issues of concern as regards the proposed means of vehicular access to the site, with Appendix B of the audit showing clearly that there are no recorded collision records within the immediate vicinity of the site. From this, I would advise that it is clear that the proposed development can be provided with a satisfactory and moreover safe means of vehicular access, this fact also having been confirmed by the Council's Transport Planning Unit within their consultation response. On the matter of the impact of the proposed development upon the Antonine Wall World Heritage Site and its associated buffer zone, it is of importance that members recognise that neither Historic Environment Scotland or the Council's Museum Service have offered any objection to the proposed development. On the matter of the affordable housing provision that would form part of the proposed development, discussions undertaken directly with the Council's housing services note their support for the on-site provision of this housing at a level of 25%, as is proposed under this application, this fact being confirmed within their consultation response. Finally, and subject to securing an appropriate developer contribution, the need for which is both acknowledged and accepted by my client, the Council's Children's Service has offered no objection to the proposed development in relation to issues of impact upon the local catchment schools. In summary, therefore, none of the consultation responses raise any issues which cannot be addressed fully in due course. In terms of other considerations which are of significance to the determination of this application, it is important to note the advice set out at paragraph 7b.6 of the report, which confirms that the Council currently has a shortfall in its effective 5-year housing land supply, and I would advise that this is contrary to the requirements set out within Scottish planning policy, which requires that an effective 5-year supply of housing land be maintained at all times. The nature of the development planning system is such that this shortfall in the supply cannot be addressed through the next iteration of the local development plan, this being due to the timescales involved, and as such, the only way that this shortfall can be remedied is to do the granting of planning permission for windfall housing sites. The site which is before you today can, in my view, be suitably justified against the relevant provisions of the local development plan and will, in line with the requirements of SPP, contribute towards sustainable development. This site is effective and can make an immediate contribution towards addressing this shortfall in the Council's effective housing land supply. Furthermore, the form of development which is envisaged for the site, which I would advise members if the application is successful, is expected to be delivered by Callow Homes, will ensure that an appropriate range and choice of housing opportunities can be provided within the Polmont area, with it being important for members to note that the development will also facilitate the on-site delivery of much needed affordable housing units. I thank members for allowing me to make this short presentation, and in due course we would be pleased to answer any questions which members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benny, for the, and within time as well. I don't think we have any statutory consultees.
Community Council representative.
Oh, next is a okay, Mr. Stewart. Michael Stewart.
Can you hear me?
Now I get you, yeah.
Thank you very much, convener. I'm speaking on behalf of Polmont Community Council. There already has been, the committee will no doubt have access to our comments on this application, but I'll just briefly run through them. The development, we feel, will increase traffic volume entering and exiting on the A803 Polmont Road, especially at peak times, and we consider that the existing infrastructure will be insufficient to cope with this new demand. We also have concerns in relation to the volume of new vehicles that will enter or exit this proposal, and this we consider will pose an increased threat to local residents in relation to road safety. We have concerns over the loss of amenity to the properties which bound onto the proposed development, especially in Polmont Park. Their gardens currently have an open aspect, and this will be lost with this development. Polmont in certain areas has well documented problems with drainage capacity infrastructure, and we request that information be provided by the applicant to determine whether or not this development can be supported through the current treatment works. We also consider that the proposed site currently provides green space between Polmont and beyond, and should be considered as inappropriate development on land which is out with the urban village limits. This is Polmont countryside development, and therefore should not be subject to development. We also consider that the proposed development does not comply with Scottish planning guidance, education and new development, structure plan policy. This states new housing will not be permitted unless adequate school capacity is available or made available. I consider the local primary and secondary schools to be at capacity already, and they cannot accommodate any further pupils that this development will generate. Additional strain will also be put on Polmont train station relative to the parking of vehicles for commuters and travellers. There is currently insufficient parking provision at this station, with many vehicles already parking in the surrounding streets and the health centre car park. This proposed development will only exacerbate this situation. We also consider that the health centre, the doctor's surgery, is currently at maximum capacity and will not be able to accept any new patients, which a housing development of this size will no doubt bring. The proposed site also sits within the Antonine World Heritage Site Buffer Zone, PE05. Therefore, this development should not be subject for this site. We consider that the pre-application consultation report is flawed and should be reissued to all parties concerned. I think evidence should be provided by the applicant that Polmont Community Council were indeed notified as suggested. The last notification we received was for the 23rd of March 2020 at Polmont Bowling Club, which we understand did not take place due to COVID restrictions. Events were going to be moved online, however, Polmont Community Council received no prior notice of these events, otherwise we would have raised formal comments at the appropriate stages. The pre-application consultation report as submitted by Andrew Benny Planning Limited indicates that different councillors were notified on the 18th of June 2021 and not the correct ones, Councillor Nimmo, Councillor Nicholl and Councillor McHugh. Once again, the pre-application consultation is flawed and should be recommissioned. Polmont Community Council did not receive the pre-notification of online consultation event on the 24th of August 2021. The application should provide evidence, the applicant, should provide evidence that this invite was issued correctly, please. That basically concludes Polmont Community Council's representation. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Mr. Stewart. And now we'll open up to the members of the committee. If there's any questions that you want to ask of either party that's spoken. Mr. Kerr, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Probably a few questions for Brent, just for clarification, and understand it didn't need to be for this meeting. It can be for the meeting when it comes to the proper meeting. And just leading on for what Mr. Stewart says there about the length of time. How long's this application been in?
Just off the top of my head, it's a it's a 2021 application, so well, it's at least a year. But from memory, it came in towards the end of last year.
Okay. Thank you. That's my first question. Just seems an awful long time for it to be sitting. With regards to we indicated that there's potential for accidents. So I don't know if it's maybe Gary to answer this, or get the answer for the meeting. How many accidents has been recorded on this stretch of road?
Gary.
Through you, convener, I think I'll ask Graham Crawford, our roads development
Graham,
team,
right.
to answer that. Councillor Kerr, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Graham?
Convener, the last 10 years, one accident on the, when was it? The 18th of May 2016. Single car travelling along, burst tyre, hit the wall at the bridge just down the hill from the proposed new access. The comment I made in my thing was not about the number of accidents, it was the severity of injury in the accidents. Any accidents that have been on this road that had intended to have severe injuries. This guy had severe head injuries from inside the car when he hit the wall at the bridge. And it's the same for most of the accidents on this stretch of road over the past. My comments were that we need to take great care how we design the junction for this. It wasn't saying that we shouldn't do it for accident reasons. The original, if I take you back even further, this was originally part of the old A9, and there was a fatal at the lodge just down from the junction. This is back to 1979-80, and that's when they put all the splitter islands in, rebuilt the road and put all the splitter islands in to try and reduce the overtaking. It was an overtaking situation that caused the fatal at that time, and these are the only things I can find going back through that have impacted on the design of this road. So I would also take that into consideration, because we know there's a lot of, not immediately in front of the thing, but that whole section of road, I have to look at the whole thing when I'm putting a new junction onto it and take care that I do it properly, or that it's done properly.
Thanks very much, Graham. Thanks very much. As you say, it doesn't seem a lot, but well, it isn't a lot. Anybody for education on the line? No.
Yes.
That's probably for you, Brent, to get for when the meeting is. There's been questions raised regarding the capacity, and you mentioned yourself at St Margaret's and Graham High School, and that a contribution would be needed. Have we got capacity figures for West Quarter or Lauriston? It doesn't mean to say we need to put these children to St Margaret's if that's an issue. You just get that for the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's something I need to get from Children's Services, and we can put something in the future report on that.
Yeah. As been mentioned on page 9, 4.4, the Anthony Wall, it's the Anthony Buffer Zone. The applicant's agent saying that it doesn't encroach in that. And if the members of the committee remember, when we went to the Klondike, that was one of the questions we asked, and there was a great amount of work being done in the Klondike, and I'm sure it was our officer Julie Seidel says that it was at the other side of the road, where next to the Klondike. So can you just get clarification on that, Brent, for us, please?
Yeah, that's fine. It's definitely, the site is definitely shown in the local development plan as part of the buffer zone.
Well, it didn't when we done the site of the Klondike. So I just want clarification, please.
Yeah, that's fine. I can look at the Klondike site in relation to the buffer zone, and we can come back to you on that.
Two probably minor things left. And I don't know if it'll be Mr. Dryden or Mr. Henderson. What determines an application to be a major application?
Yeah, through you, Kevin, I'm happy just to clarify. It depends on a couple of factors. Is the actual site area, or obviously the number of units that are proposed for this case housing. And obviously in this case, I think the indicative number of 48. I think my understanding is that it's actually the site area in this case that would trigger it being a major application.
Right. Okay. And it states in page 7, 2.1. significantly out with the local development plan 2. How do we get to that significant? I thought it would just be, we'd be happy with just it's outside the. Why do we get the significant bit of it, Brent?
It's a judgment by officers in terms of the significance. Due to the size of the site, it's a major development, which would imply in our minds that as a major development would be significantly contrary to the local development plan on that basis.
Right, okay. I just wanted to understand. Thanks very much, convener. That's all I've got at the moment.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr, for giving up your time. Anyone else got any questions for anyone? Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Deputy Convener. Just a couple of questions. I was on the council's website and I think it was mentioned about a site layout, but I couldn't really see a site layout. Would it be possible to get the site layout for maybe even before the planning committee? I couldn't see the site. I could see the location plan, but I couldn't see the site layout. I think that would be quite handy. Is that something we've got?
Well, yeah, I mean, we can share it now if you would like to see it now, Councillor Redmond.
I think that'd be good actually. Possibly maybe the house designs as well, just to see what type of houses they are.
It's a planning application in principle, so we don't have house designs, but we have an indicative site layout, which is available just now if you would like to see it.
I think that'd be good. Cheers.
Jack, the plan's called indicative site layout. If you're able to share it.
That's Frawley, no Redmond.
Oh, there we go.
It shows a centrally located junction off the A road, going into a series of internal streets with predominantly detached houses with some terrace houses and some flats, I think, in the right-hand corner, which would be the affordable housing area. I guess the other thing to note is there's a green buffer area on the western edge of the site to the Palmont burn.
So the existing houses are just to the right of this drawing, is that?
Yeah, that's correct. They're to the right. Yeah.
Right. And are they single story or double story? And then we've got some flats.
We don't have any elevations, but I would expect that they're all 2-story.
Right.
Apart from there may be some wheelchair accessible units included within the affordable housing area. I think, well, I can see potentially one wheelchair accessible unit within the affordable housing area.
So I think I'd heard something about there were going to be houses for older people. Is that the flats basically? Is it?
That was a previous proposal which was considered by the reporter,
right.
Looking at local development plan 2, but that's not carried through to this application.
All right, I understand. Just a couple of questions. The Antonine Wall buffer zone. Just sort of expect. Is it what is the buffer zone on the Antonine Wall? Is is it a mile from the Antonine Wall? Is it 100 meters from the Antonine Wall? Could you maybe talk about that a bit more, please? I think you might be on mute, Brent.
You're on mute.
I'm not sure there's an actual distance as such from the line of the Antonine Wall. I don't know whether Alex would be able to assist at all in terms of how they drew the boundaries for the buffer zone.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much, Deputy Convener. So the Antonine Wall buffer zone, the purpose of that, when the World Heritage Site boundaries were being drawn up, the purpose of the buffer zone was really to protect the landscape setting of the wall itself. Obviously, the wall cuts through, you know, a swathe of central Scotland, and you know, the sort of marked feature of it is its kind of place within the landscape. So that was what the buffer zone is for. You know, it's quite distinct from the line of the wall itself. You know, the buffer zone is really intended just to protect the landscape setting. You know, so when there's development in and around the buffer zones, you know, it's not saying that, you know, it's basically saying that impacts on the wall, so visibility from the wall, key parts of the wall, that all has to be kind of looked at for things within the buffer zone.
Right. And will we have a detailed report on that, like where the wall is and how far it maybe is from the wall? And I can understand you saying it's a landscape element, but just for the when we go to meet with us.
I mean, the application wasn't accompanied by you know, a landscape and visual assessment, and you know, a specific assessment which would normally draw from a landscape visual assessment. It wasn't accompanied by a specific assessment on, you know, visibility from the wall. You know, what I would say, you know, is that the site obviously is within the buffer zone, and you know, it's some distance from the wall. So, you know, whilst it is an issue, it's a determining issue. It's not, you know, it's not the kind of the key determining policy issue, in my view.
Right. And just going on for some points talked about Mr. Stewart, obviously about the school at St Margaret's in Braes, and obviously kind of thinking about development in the Polmont wide area with Gilston Park as well, and that St Margaret's was mentioned in that. Well, do we have maybe our education? Could they maybe make us a report on the strategy for expanding school capacity in the Polmont area? Because I'd imagine there must be something. There must be a sort of target capacity for St Margaret's now. Once both, if you know, with all the new development that's going on. So I'm just kind of wondering what the capacity at the schools will be, because obviously after Gilston Park, I think the plan is to expand capacity. So what's the?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, obviously you mentioned the Gilston application. Yeah, which will put significant pressure on the primary school. There's a contribution required for that site as well, and I think the plan is to extend the school to provide additional capacity, but we can certainly get more information on what form that would take to include in the report.
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. And then just following on from another one of Mr. Stewart's points about the kind of road safety aspect, is this I can't quite make it exactly where it is on the location plan, but is this like a 60 mile an hour country road, or is that the speed on the roads? Is that a 60 mile an hour country road? Is that what we're talking about? I don't know if we could answer that one.
Convener, can I step in there? It's a 40 mile an hour limit from the limit of Polmont to Lauriston, because it's more a movement road than anything else. It sits at 40. It's not. Right. It's not classed as a residential road, so it's up to 40 in that section.
Right. Cheers. Perfect. And I think that was all my questions then. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Redmond. Anyone else? Any questions?
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Councillor Foley.
Forrest.
Sorry, Forrest.
Oh, thanks, Alf. Thank you, Convener. First of all, I've got to apologise. For some reason or other, I've had a broadband outage here. Just as Mr. Stewart was starting to speak, so I've missed everything up to that point. So my apologies for that. For information for other people here, there are actually 3 developments just about to be ongoing in Gilston, Oakbank and Aldi, which gives a total number of 535. There are 2 further developments going to be laid before us very shortly, which will add probably another 35 on top of that, which takes St Margaret's School way above the capacity that it's designed for. So I would echo Councillor Redmond's request for a report from the schools as to how they're going to overcome this, because there isn't much room within St Margaret's to expand further to that. Other schools are affected as well. There is one other thing that it's been mentioned, and we also got a picture of it from Mr. Frawley earlier on, was the access gate to the site. I'd like to point out that this isn't actually an access gate. This is a bit of brickwork or stonework that has been chopped, a wee bit of ground taken away at the back of it, and a gate put on to make it look like an access gate. Why anybody would want to do that, I don't really know. But this is the case. There is no access to that site. The pavement hasn't been lowered, so therefore it can't be classed as a road. The other thing that the agent, Mr. Benny, you said that the boundary problems that the reporter highlighted didn't really come into it because you couldn't see them. Now, you can't see the distillery or the garden centre, but the boundary is still there. Whether you can see them or not, a boundary is still there, and therefore the reduction in spacing of 200 kilometres, 200 metres, is a justifiable reason for the reporter to have issued that. That's what I'd like to see at this moment. Thanks.
Thanks, Gordon. Any more questions? Councillor Bowes. Who is it? Councillor Bowes. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Deputy Convener. Gonna cover one thing right away, to do with the report on education and things like that. That this is not an education committee. This is a planning committee. Planning officers will advise us on what's required through individual reports in individual areas. If you want a report on education, how they're going to develop education, Councillor Nutter is the convener for that. I'm sure she'll be able to tell you who to go to, and they'll get you for that. I don't think we should really be bringing in full-blown reports from education into a planning committee. We get advice from officers on education as we do on other things. To get to the point of the question, I would like to be asked, because it's come up a couple of times now, and Mr. Benny in particular went through the report and disagreed with an awful lot of the report, and one of the few things he did agree with was the housing and land supply. Now, given that LDP2 has ran through a period of the pandemic and that the construction industry has been closed down for a certain amount of time, I think for us only to be 100 houses out over that period is actually a pretty damn good performance, and I would guess that other local authority areas will be in a worse situation. I would like to maybe get an idea of where that stands. I don't know, Brent, if we can be speaking, this is for this application, but also for other applications. I don't know if we can get feedback from the reporter on that, because it seems to be getting used for the ability to then go and develop greenfield sites. And given that there is a reasonable reason why sites haven't been developed, i.e. there was nobody able to work, the building sites were closed down, I don't think it's unreasonable to be the small amount that we are behind. So if we can maybe get some sort of feedback from on that, that would be useful, or even a bit more detail. I know there was a bit more detail in a previous report with the difference between land supply and house supply. And one actually we ticked the box, the other one was a narrow miss, which obviously sometimes comes up. I just wonder if that can be, make sure we've got a good amount written about that. I think it's important, so that we don't fall into the trap of approving something because of a shortage of land or housing supply when realistically we don't have, or at least we know the reason why there is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Boones. Thank you for your reference to your reports coming in the future. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Deputy Convener, and I suppose I'm just, and apologies if I say something out of turn. I'm a bit confused, I suppose, in terms of where we are in the procedure, because I understand I don't have questions directly for the applicant and the statutory constituencies. I would like to ask for things in for officers to bring back to put in the report, and one of them would be about reflecting on the education capacity statement or whatever, but I don't want to come in with that at the moment if we're not at that. But I'm just noting in some of the contributions, and as long as we get there in the end, I'm all good, but I don't want to jump the gun and ask officers to add things and to clarify within the report from what we've heard. I just don't have any specific questions for the applicant or the officers at the moment. I would like to have a contribution about what we can ask for, and obviously we'll do that in the last part. So I don't want to jump in now, but if we're in that part now, I'll happily give some asks. In your hands.
Yourself.
With your leave, Convener, I think sometimes naturally questions do arise that lead to information that's sought, but I think, Councillor Murtagh, it might be beneficial to hear the rest of the discussion and perhaps allow you an opportunity to come in under the item of the agenda towards the end, which allows members to request information for the final report. Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. That's fine. I shall wait until that point, but I have no questions specifically for the consultees.
Thanks, Councillor. Hand up somewhere. Jim, but you had your hand up. Was that a?
I'll wait to the same as Councillor Murtagh to the appropriate time.
Very much. Anyone else? Being no one else, can I ask Mr. Benny to.
Oh, sorry, at this point, Convener, it's an opportunity for parties who have submitted representations to speak. I think we maybe have one. Well, they've not joined the meeting. We don't have any. No. I think that being the case, you were quite correct, Convener. I suspect we're now at the point where the applicant has an opportunity to reply to points raised.
The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and I'll keep this as brief as I possibly can. Just coming back on a number of the points Mr. Stewart on behalf of the Community Council raised, and I have them noted as follows. First of all, in terms of traffic, I would just refer back once again to the two consultations from the 2 units within the council's road section and to the terms of the road safety audit, none of which raise any traffic issues associated with the proposed access. Next point in relation to residential amenity and the impact of any given development upon existing views, just to re-emphasise that the planning system doesn't operate in a way to preserve an individual's rights to a view. I understand that impacts on individuals affected, but the planning system doesn't operate to protect individuals' rights to a view. Consultation responses from the Council's flooding service once again raised no issues in terms of the application. Mr. Stewart raised the issue of drainage infrastructure and how that would be impacted upon by the proposed development, and I would relates to a matter raised by Councillor Forrest in terms of the reduction in the separation between Polmont and Grangemouth in terms of what the local development plan examination reporter said. Now, he came to the conclusion that the development of this site, as proposed at the time, it covers the same application site boundary, reduced the separation by approximately 200 metres. My view on that is factually incorrect. It has no impact whatsoever in terms of the current separation between Polmont and Grangemouth, because the nearest part of Polmont currently sits some distance to the north on the northern boundary of this site. So if the separation distance is already there and we're down here, we can't possibly be reducing the distance because we don't lie any closer to Grangemouth than Polmont already does. That was the only point I was making in relation to that aspect of the reporter's findings. And that's all I would like to come back on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benny. Before we move to the identifying other planning issues that we want to see in the report, is there any other questions from any of the members? No. So if we move to identify other planning issues that we wish to see addressed in the reports to the planning committee when we meet to discuss this next. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Deputy Convener. So I suppose the first one that's been brought up by some members is just to clarify the situation in terms of the education position. So, and Councillor Redmond was quite correct that every year we do actually have a education capacity statement, and it looks at the overall capacity across the whole estate. And I always find that if that information can be clear in the report is kind of my first ask. But as I've asked in previous planning applications, if we can particularly ask education to reflect on, they when they do those statements, they look at what's likely in terms of what's already allocated within local development plan and etc. But to be mindful of what's already been granted planning permission or at perhaps an advanced stage, so that we are clear that if we are effectively saying, well, this is a number of units, that it's yes, we can cope with that number of units, but obviously if it's a number of units on top of another 500, then that alters that, and we've had that situation in other sites. So it's just I'm sure Brent's familiar with the concept of what I'm asking in terms of when we clarify that in the reports. That would be my first ask, just to make sure that education capacity statement for all the schools that were mentioned can be in the report, clear that if there is a contribution, so what sort of contribution, what sort of changes to the school, and overall both to the high school and the primary school would be my sort of first ask. The other matter, which seems slightly confusing and kind of obvious, is that matter that was last spoken about the distance and the lack of of what the reporter said. So effectively, if officers can reflect on what has been said tonight in the different views in terms of what the reporter said about the site and about the distance, if we could have perhaps a bit more information and illustration of that, because it's quite confusing to get your head around that. We have an additional site, but it doesn't reduce the distance. I understand what the representative is saying, but I think if officers could clarify that and try and illustrate that in the report, that'd be helpful to members. And my third ask would just be, there's obviously the road's opinion, and I think there was perhaps if we could have a bit more detail about, I know there were some fairly historic citations of accidents and stuff like that. I suppose I'd like a little bit more information about the history on the road, maybe just in light of what's been said this evening. And I know that obviously our roads officers will do that anyway as part of the report, but I think it's maybe a significant issue. I'm sure others have other things to ask, but they would be my main things to be clarified in the report. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murtagh. Anyone else got any questions? Councillor Stigler.
Thanks, Deputy Convener. Just a couple of things. First one, I'd like to echo the comments on that Councillor Murtagh's just put forward on further clarity on accident injury average statistics. I think that's probably an important consideration to put in there. Just wanted to make a quick observation that just because there's no objection to something from a consultee doesn't necessarily mean that there's no impact. And I think that's probably important to point that out. I'm aware of, or I have been aware historically of surface water drainage issues in the Pullman Park area. So I wonder if we can get some further kind of detailed analysis of that issue and whether or not that could be a consideration on this development, and what, if there's any impact where that's concerned, what can be done better where that's concerned. I know that there can be significant impacts on residents in the current sites that we have there. I think that's. I think I would also like to see a bit more, given that it is a greenfield site. I'd like to see a bit more detail on the impact to biodiversity, where that's concerned, and what, if anything, can be done to mitigate any impact within those considerations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sinclair. Anyone else? Okay, being no one else, thank you very much for attending today. Have a lovely evening, and we'll see you all at the next planning meeting. Thanks again. Good night.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you,
Thanks,
convener.
Chair. And well done on chairing your first PDP. That's or PDH. You don't want to chair a PDP, trust me on that one.
See you later.
Thanks.
See you later.
Night all. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.